So, I noticed there's quite a lot of people out there that don't know how to properly hotkey their units when playing Zerg in StarCraft 2. I do recommend unhotkeying the all army hotkey, and obviously you do have the option to just simply rally your hatcheries to one central location and you can pick up the units over there every once in a while. But it's actually possible to hotkey all of the cocoons while the units are building. And I think this is actually really important, and one of the things that not a lot of people are necessarily aware of. So, all I've done right here, I have created 3 hatcheries inside of like a practice game. And I want to try and quickly show you how you do this. So, first off, we need to establish the difference between hitting Ctrl +1 and Shift +1. So, if I grab this drone right over here, and I hit Shift +1 on my keyboard, you will see that right over here at the bottom section of the screen, it shows up with a little number over there that indicates there's one unit on this control group. However, the same thing happens if I were to select this drone and hit Ctrl +1. There's a difference between the two. Control, when you hit a bunch of units, right? You select a couple units and you hit Ctrl +1. It adds all of the units that you've currently got selected into the control group of 1. But it also, on top of that, overwrites existing control group number 1. So if I were to select these 2 drones right over here and I hit Ctrl +1, these 2 are no longer control group number 1. Now, there's a difference here. If you say, for example, have control group number 1 right over here with these 2 drones, you select this drone and you hit Shift +1, look what happens to the number over here. It gets added to the existing hotkey group of number 1. So that's the first little bit of information. The reason why I'm bringing this up, if I make a couple Zerglings over here. Let me wait just a little bit before they finish. The reason why I bring it up is because it's possible to add units that are still inside of the cocoon to the existing hotkey group. So, say I've got a couple Zerglings right over here, right? I hit Ctrl +1, which means that they are going to be in control group number 1. If then, for example, right, I'm fighting over here, right over here, there's like an aggression happening over here, right? And I want to make more attacking units. I can hit hotkey group number 4, which is all of my hatcheries. I can create units using hotkeys. I can then control-click the cocoons at the bottom section of the screen, which effectively deselects the larva, and then hit Shift +1, which adds the cocoons right now to the hotkey group of number 1, which means that while I'm fighting over here, the units that spawn will immediately run towards the other units that I already have in hotkey group number 1. And that's actually a really, really, really big thing that helps out quite a bit in StarCraft. So the reason why you want to do this is because it makes it much easier to reinforce your army units. So, for example, right, if I want to make a couple Zerglings right now and I'm fighting over here, I can hit 4QQ, or 4QEE, hit Control, click the Zerg key, cocoon button over there, and then hit Shift +1, which makes it so that the units I'm producing right now will automatically run towards this control group. And that's a big deal. Now, the one thing that you do want to make sure you press as well is Control. Let me quickly explain this. If I were to hit Shift +1 right now, I would also add these larvae to the control group number 1, and I don't want that. So that's why you want to click Control, you hold down Control, you click on the cocoons, and then hit Shift +1. Alright, so that's the difference between Control and Shift, and why you want to utilize both of them in StarCraft. There's one more that they added back in Legacy of the Void. This was not a thing back in Heart of the Swarm and Wings of Liberty. It has been in the game since, I think, like 2015 right now. And then it's Alt modifier keys as well. So we have Control +1, Shift +1. They both do different things. Right now, there's also the control group Alt plus, for example, hotkey number 2. There's a difference here, and this is very useful, especially when you're playing Zerg once again. But also if you, for example, use the All Army hotkey and you're playing Terran or Protoss. Say, for example, right, you're fighting over here and you want to get a second group of units out of this hotkey group that you've got right over here. So all of the units that are running here are currently in control group number 1. Now, what I can do is select half of them. Can be less, can be more. And hit Alt +2. Now, look at the selection right over here. So currently, hotkey group number 1 has 72 units in it. If I hit Alt +2... it removes the units on the right from the existing hotkey group number 1 and adds them to a new control group. Which means now I've got 2 separate hotkey groups for both of these groups of units. This is especially useful, right? Say, for example, this is all once again in one control group. Say, for example, you have a bunch of units that you want to send over here for a run-by. So you, like, send them over here for a control group. Then you select the units that you want. You hit Alt+1, or Alt+2, rather, and then it removes these out of the control. See? So now I can continue fighting over here. I can continue making stuff. Hit Shift+2. Get things to run over here. And that means these Zerglings all of a sudden are deselected. So using a combination of control hotkeys, shift hotkey modifiers, and then also alt hotkey modifiers is extremely useful. I think the biggest reason, though, why you want to use it, and the most useful reason, is to add units to the control groups that you're trying to produce out of while they're still inside the cocoons. So oftentimes it's very easy, and I see this with a lot, especially with like newer players in StarCraft, it's very easy to always want to produce by looking at the structure that you want to produce with, right? So here's a common error that I see quite a lot with players that are relatively new to StarCraft. You will see them going back to the hatchery and then produce units, right? What you ideally want to do is look at the army and use control groups to do exactly this. Hit Shift+1, and this way it will automatically run towards the army that you're currently looking at, without actually having to look at the hatchery. The only time you really want to look at the hatchery is when you want to quickly do some injects. So this is one of the pretty easy ways to improve in StarCraft 2. And if you've got this properly set up and you really want to take it to the next level, unbinding the all army hotkey, even if it's only for a week, is extremely valuable. I highly recommend unbinding the all army hotkey, at least at some point when you're playing StarCraft. I personally usually do have it set up once again, but I think it's very valuable to be able to learn to play without using the all army hotkey, because it's very easy to become reliant on it. And say, for example, right, on this map there's not any watchtowers, but say, for example, you have like a Zergling sitting over here at the watchtower. You know, and you use the all army hotkey, obviously those units are all going to be sent away, or like spotter units or scouting units or whatever, they're all going to be sent away. And you don't really want to have that happen. One more thing, and I get this question quite a bit as well. How do I quickly deselect one Zergling like that? How did that work? How did that work? So one thing you can do, right? It's a little easier to showcase with a small group of units. What you can do is hold down Shift and deselect the unit that is currently in your selection. So say, for example, I want to run my Zerglings over here, but I only really want to have 2 of them that go over there. What I can do is right-click over here, hold down Shift, click on the Zergling selection button right there at the bottom. Just click 2 random Zerglings, and then recreate hotkey group number 1. Alright, so let me show you again. If you want to do this fast, generally speaking, if you want to have, say you want to have like 1 Zergling scouting the 3rd base over here, and you have this big control group of Zerglings, you click over here with all your links, hold down Shift, click once, control group number 1 once again, so you hit Ctrl+1, and then 1 Zergling, I think it's currently stuck, there you go, eventually will run over there. So this is the reason that a lot of players have become very quick at sending out little spotter units just like that all over the map. It's a little bit of dancing on the keyboard, but eventually, small groups of Zerglings will now make their way towards all of those expansions. And all of these are considered to be pretty basic things in StarCraft. All of the pro gamers will utilize this constantly as well. But I don't think there's a lot of people that actually realize that this is even an option, especially when you're new. It took me a long time to realize that all of these things were a thing. Especially Shift. I knew about Ctrl+1, and I thought that Shift+1 kind of did the same thing. There's a big difference. So once again, Ctrl+1 overwrites the existing hotkey group of number 1, or creates it if there's currently no hotkey group number 1. Shift+1 adds existing units, or cocoons I suppose, to the existing hotkey group of number 1. So for example, right now, I added the units right over here to the existing hotkey group of number 1. And then hotkey Alt+2 in this case would remove units out of the existing hotkey groups that they are in and add them to a new one. So the way you can jump quickly between hatcheries is with a so-called base camera hotkey. What this does is basically it centers on the main structure. So if you go to global, you go to, where is it? I think it's camera? Yes. It is the base camera hotkey. By default, the hotkey for this is backspace, which is terrible. I personally have it rebound to space. I think the default key for space is jump to the most recent alert or something along those lines. Jumping to the most recent alert is not very reliable and generally speaking doesn't do that much. So I've not got that hotkey. Instead, I've got the base camera hotkey, which basically makes it so that every time I hit spacebar, it will cycle between the different bases. Another thing you can also do is set up camera hotkeys. I've made a lot of separate videos about that as well. Back in the day, they're maybe a little bit older nowadays, but they're still relevant. For me, I have create location number 1, shift plus F1, shift plus F2, shift plus F3, and shift plus F4 for the different locations, and then jump to location 1, 2, 3, and 4 to F1, F2, F2, F3. So what that means right now is that I can go ahead and, for example, set up a control group right over here with shift plus 1, and then a control or a camera control group right over here with shift plus 2. And what this now allows me to do is that with a single click, right now if I hit F2, I'm going to jump straight to the main, and I can quickly, with a single click rather than a double click, which may not sound very significant, but it's actually a pretty big deal. You can quickly jump between the different locations. Usually I use this to center on main bases. So early on you will see me setting up these hotkeys on the different expansions that I plan on taking. So right now if you look at the minimap, I can quickly switch between the 4 expansions that I'm likely to take. And then when I actually put down a structure, so right now it's like roughly at the location of the natural. When I actually put down a structure, I create the hatchery. I click on the hatchery, then I click on the little portrait. You can't really see it, but I click on the little portrait, which makes sure it's perfectly centered on the screen, and then I hit shift plus 2 again to override it. So in this case right now, I know that this hatchery is always going to be perfectly centered. I actually think on this map it might be a little bit awkward, but I know that this hatch right over here is going to be perfectly centered. I can already prepare my mouse movement in anticipation of where I know my queens are. So what I can do is hit, in this case, F1, box, and then inject the hatchery. But you can already sort of like put your mouse in the position where you know your queens are going to be. And it makes it a little bit quicker as well. Because I know that these bases are always going to be in the center of the hotkey. So you can see right here that it's always going to be right in the center. All right. Any more follow-up questions? As far as my queen injects go. Okay, so in the early game, I will usually use these camera hotkeys. So I will have a queen at each of the bases. Sometimes I hotkey them all, sometimes I don't. It kind of depends on the scenario and what matchup I'm playing. But I will always use the camera hotkeys when I reliably want to use it. Later on into the game, if it's like a little bit more hectic and I've got a lot of bases generating larvae, the more inaccurate method, but faster, is by using the base camera hotkey. So that's the hotkey I mentioned earlier. I basically just hold down shift and I basically spam between these two bases real quick. Using the base camera hotkey, this does cause the queens to waddle around for a bit, so it's less accurate, but it's much faster. So if I want to quickly inject these bases, this is at top speed, what it looks like. Right, so that's all of the bases hotkeyed, and then we can go back to the fight. Do you want to hotkey all of the hatcheries? Yes. You always want to have all of your hatcheries that you use hotkeyed as 1. So it's really critical. I don't think there's really ever a moment, other than, say, for example, if you want to go for like a proxy hatchery, if you're cheesing your opponent, you want to put like a hatchery over here, or maybe like your opponent is cannon rushing and you were forced to take this expansion, and this is still your main. In that case, I will separately hotkey my hatcheries. But in all other scenarios, I would say in like 99% of the games, I will have all of my hatcheries on one hotkey group, yes. Can you hotkey creep tumors? You can, yes. I personally don't do that. I know, I believe TLO, pro gamer from Germany, I believe he does hotkey his creep tumors. You basically, if you want to do that though, you basically always want to like re-hotkey the active ones, right? I guess it's technically good, but I personally like to just go on the minimap and just click the minimap and just click the creep tumors. Yeah, so if you want to do it, if you want to hotkey your tumors, right? You would have to have the active ones hotkeyed, then spread the tumors, and then once again hotkey those. So you use control right there, not shift, control to override the existing hotkey group. But I don't think a lot of pro gamers do that, to be honest. I don't think a lot of people do that. Oh, okay, so someone's asking, how do you quickly put units into a gas geyser? So there's 2 ways of doing it, right? When you start up a gas, you can make a couple drones and just rally them. That works. Another option is to just simply grab a couple from a mineral line. This is actually a thing that I noticed a lot as well when I first started playing StarCraft myself. Players get really good at grabbing drones really quickly. So, for example, you can grab 3 just like that. I didn't do anything magically there. You just basically click on drones and you just box them in there. Say, for example, you grab a couple too many. You can right-click like that, hold down Shift, deselect them, and then send the other ones back to mining. Yeah, that is just something you become faster at over time. If you grab too many, you use the same technique that you use when you spread around, for example, Zerglings. You hold down Shift and you send the unit just like that. You can do that on the minimap as well. That's what I explained earlier. So that usually helps quite a bit in that regard as well. There's no magic involved. So basically all people or all players do. I thought this was like a really difficult thing initially as well, but you just grab 3. And at some point you become really good at pointing out exactly where the 3 are that you want to box in there. There's no magic. Like there's a little bit of, it's like catching a fish, you know, you need a little bit of patience. And just box them in groups of 3 into the gas. Lowko, I got one more really important question. How do you make your units dance? Okay, here's what you do. You go in the chat and you type /dance. It's important. Alright, that's an important skill. How would your opponent know to leave the game if you're not dancing units inside of his main base?